Well, it's good to be here, and amazing honor for me to get to be sharing the stage with you, Dan.
And same for me. And by the way, Seth and Angela, I love you.
How are you doing?
I'm doing a lot better than I thought it would be 2.5 years into my diagnosis. Um, you know, other than when I fall or get COVID, I've been extremely happy. And it's been something when I was diagnosed, something changed in me. And I was always so future focused. And I switched and I am living day to day. I don't think about the course of the disease. And I've been surrounded by so many people who have offered love and support, and I have a purpose. And the purpose is, which we can talk about later, to eradicate ALS. So what I've discovered is, when facing a fatal disease, that only two things matter: relationships and having a purpose. And that has made me incredibly happy. And I will say, my wife, Elisa, and my 3 kids are here, and they've been so wonderful. So I'm happy.
I have to say that ever since I've known you, and I'm going to talk about that for just a second, but I think that relationships and purpose have always marked your life. So I don't think that that's new. I think that what you're basically saying is that there's a concentrated version of that right now. But we met. I don't even know how I was so fortunate to get the invitation, but I got a call. What year would that have been? 2000 maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it was the year 2000. And someone whose name I had never heard of in my life, Dan Doctoroff, was calling saying, I've got this idea to bring the Olympics to New York City. And that doesn't seem like the wildest dream when you hear that today, but it seemed like a really, really wild dream to me in the year 2000. How in the world, why in the world would anyone think about bringing the Olympics to New York? And Dan put together the most impressive team of people. Jay Kriegel, a number of people. Every single meeting I went to was more impressive than the previous. Every presentation was more audacious than the previous. And I found myself falling in love with New York, just following your dream and doing whatever little bit I could to help that happen.
You did help it to happen. It only didn't happen, but...
Then I didn't help it happen.
You helped it along. But, when I was researching the Olympics, I've studied past Olympic Games, and I recognized that some cities had used the Olympics as a catalyst, get things done that have been on the agenda for generations. And I put together a team that would develop plans, not just for venues, but for neighborhoods. And I took it to Mike Bloomberg, and he signed up, gave us some money. He went on the board, and when he ran for mayor, he adopted a bunch of those ideas. And then when he won, surprisingly, he asked me to be deputy mayor. And I turned it down twice. But he finally convinced me.
What was the linchpin that convinced you?
He said that being in City Hall would enable me to be more effective in getting those things done than if I were outside. And it turned out to be true.
And so when you took that job, I mean, we'll go back to the Olympics for a minute, because I remember very well when you said cities either don't have the political will or the financial ability to get a lot of things done that they need to get done. But the lasting benefit of Olympics, because there were a lot of critics, like, who in the world would want to bring all that nonsense to New York and all the, it lasts for 2 weeks, right? The Olympics.
17 days.
17 days. And there were so many New Yorkers who were saying that's the last thing in the world. And what you kept everybody focused on was what lives on after that, and that all of these investments would actually make the city a much better place. And you were incredibly inclusive with the neighborhoods. I remember, what were the 2 X's? What was that called?
Yeah, we called it the plan, the Olympic X. And one access run from Staten Island up the East River and the Harlem River. And the other one was a rail line from Flushing Meadow through New York, Manhattan, out to New Jersey. And every venue was on one of those 2 axes.
And you were very, very focused that this is how it's going to all come together, but what we're going to leave in the wake of this is going to be neighborhoods and parks and waterways and venues that have been uplifted beyond anything that the city ever would have otherwise had the political will to do. And I'll tell you that not only was I inspired by that in a huge way, but a big part of this was going to be Hudson Yards, which we hadn't really, you've all heard of Hudson Yards. You hadn't heard about it back then. And I thought I was so smart, I created something called Hudson Yards Catering.
I remember.
Had to change the name to Union Square Events, because it turns out no one goes to a catering kitchen like they go to a restaurant. But that proved to be one of the greatest foresights, because we wouldn't have the extension of the 7 line all the way to Hudson Yards had it not been for your plan.
Yeah, that was a big part of it. And the High Line was a part of it. Greenpoint, Williamsburg, Long Island City, Coney Island, the South Bronx, Harlem, Flushing, and we had to do Lower Manhattan too. So a lot of it came out of the Olympic plan.
And this, we're going to switch to Dan Doctoroff, public servant, by the way, for $1 a year. And I remember a quote from Mike Bloomberg when Dan went back into the private sector to go run Bloomberg, LP, Bloomberg LP. I think Mike Bloomberg said something like, New York getting Dan Doctoroff for $1 a year is the best deal since Manhattan was bought for $24. Did he say something like that?
Yeah, he did.
And yeah, he was right. But Dan Doctoroff, citizen, before that, was actually doing more for the city than any citizen, I think, private citizen, in terms of the vision and then the ability to actually get it done. And I'll never forget how excited you were when the U.S. Olympic Committee approved the bid and allowed us to go on to the next round. And I'll also never forget how the greatest cheerleader, when Dan would get up and give these talks to the whole committee about why we should believe and keep going, you stood up and you listened. One stood up and one listened, but you were pretty dejected when London got the bid after that.
Yeah, I was devastated. I had spent 11 years pursuing this dream, and
11 years.
Yeah, I had to go on a bike trip by myself to Chile and Argentina to clear my mind. And
did you have a shaman?
No. And, I realized on that bike trip that you could win by losing. And I thought that all this stuff that would come out of the bid, which I was still responsible for, was of huge benefit to New York. So I thought, you can win by losing.
And were you already deputy mayor when that announcement came out?
Oh yeah, I was deputy mayor for 3.5 years, and we used the deadlines of the bidding process to get things done, like Hudson Yards. We conceived, we had a plan going in. We financed it, we refined it, and we got, I think, a vote from the city council 49-1 to approve it in January of 2005. Record time. The environmental impact statement was the second longest in American history, and the only one that was bigger was the Yucca Mountain nuclear disposal site in Nevada. So we really drove our team to get it done. And, I'm really proud of what Hudson Yards is throwing off to the city. Brad Lander, the controller, admitted just a few months ago that he was totally wrong, because over time, the revenues from the taxes will generate $20 billion to New York City, which we can obviously use for another Olympic bid. No. For, housing, for health, for environment, for safety, and other forms of
something
quality
that I'd like to ask you a question I don't think I ever have asked before, but to get everything done while you were in City Hall in such a short time obviously had to take an enormous amount of persuasion, leadership, vision, but also political savvy. like nobody gets things voted by the City Council of New York with the kind of margin you just described. And one of the amazing hallmarks of your story for me is I don't think I've ever read any article about Dan Doctoroff getting into political fisticuffs. It was about getting shit done. But how did you avoid the kind of bare knuckles stuff that goes on in any city? And the last thing I'll say before you respond is, if I've learned one thing about New York, it's a game of inches, because every time someone gets an inch, someone else lost one. But you found a way to expand the inches and not get bloody knuckles or give bloody knuckles to anyone.
Well, first of all, I will say I had an amazing team.
Says every great leader.
No, we were bound as a family, and Seth and Angela were key parts of the team. Evie Kelly, who is here tonight, was also a key part of the team. And Mark Ricks, who is here, who is responsible with Sophia Hollander for the book, which I had no idea about. We're part of the team. And I don't know who else is here. But we had a great team. And so I delegated a lot to my team, and they got things done. But we were also pretty politically savvy in terms of negotiating with the community boards, borough presidents, the city council. Nothing in city government is easy. It's all hard. And because we listened, we collaborated, we had great people, we communicated very effectively, and we told stories that convinced people that they should do what we thought. And we modified as we went along. Not too much, but we did.
Well, I remember one modification. And first of all, I want to just thank you for so many things, but one of the big parts of gratitude I feel is that your commitment to the arts, I think, really, really added and continues to add a great deal of heart and soul to this city. And I want to ask you, I think that there's probably lots of studies done that the arts are great economic drivers, but a lot of people don't get that. And I'm curious where that understanding and or love for the arts came from. I can name the Shed, obviously, which is so crucial. Theater for New Audience, which my wife Audrey was very involved with, and talk about things that were tough. I think you had to move that theater 7 times because of one inch or another. But where did your love for the arts come from?
I didn't really love the arts.
Thank you. That's what I want to know.
But I realized that they're critical to improving the quality of life in the city. So I was founding chairman of the Shed. We moved the Whitney from the Upper East Side, and Adam Weiberg, the director of the Whitney, gives me credit for convincing his board to sell them on moving down to an area that none of them had ever been to.
No, those people get the bends when they come below 42nd Street.
Exactly. The Brooklyn Arts District, BAM Arts District, the King's Theater, the PAC, which I set aside the land for. I can't take credit for it, but I set aside and defended it. So there were others that it was really important for new communities and even old communities to have cultural facilities. And the other thing that we did was parks. Parks are so critical. We did Brooklyn Beach Park, the High Line, Governor's Island.
No one had a solution for Governor's Island for years.
Yeah. We bought it for $1 from the federal government. And we tried to figure out what to do with it, and we eventually came up with a plan. There were 8 parks that Robert Moses never finished, like the High Bridge in the Bronx, Soundview, and the 6 other ones. But the thing I'm most proud of in PlanNYC, which was our sustainability plan, and it was designed to, we thought that the population was going to grow by 1 million people, so we had to accommodate 1 million more people. So we took every aspect of the physical environment, and one of the aspects was parks. And we set a goal of having every resident in the city be within 10 minutes walk of a park. And when we started, I think 65 or 70% of people lived within 10 minutes of a park. And we redid playgrounds. We did all these
plazas,
real parks. And these major signature parks. And today, 99% of New York City residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park.
It's amazing. And it's not to be taken for granted. It's a quality of life thing. It's also, I think, a big part of the PlanNYC was the sustainability aspect of it. And I think I read somewhere that since 2007, which was your last year,
Right.
that the carbon emissions of the city are actually down
20%.
That's a big deal.
PlanNYC may be the thing that I'm most proud of, because we really worked together with like 20 agencies in city government to develop a 127-point plan. And we got 125 of them done. One of the 2 that we didn't get done was congestion pricing. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yes, you do.
I feel great about it. But I'll tell you why. Because if we had passed it in 2007, 2008, $15 billion of revenue would have come to the MTA. it's not just about the money. It's we need, particularly now, to rethink the streets of Manhattan, Midtown, Lower Manhattan, and we can redo them so that they're more active and much more green, etc. But the other thing about that congestion pricing is it's a matter of equity, because there are a lot of people who can't really get to Midtown, and they're disadvantaged communities, and they lack the ability to get to the centers of opportunity that are downtown, lower Midtown, and Midtown. And that's an equity issue.
Yeah.
So we'll think of new ways to get people faster to areas of economic opportunity. So I was always a fan of that.
Do you think any of your body of work would be possible today? Was part of it the right person at the right moment in the history of this city?
You know, I think that we had 4 parts to our strategy. One was a catalyst, and 9/11 was a catalyst. And people really wanted to rebuild the city and make it greater than ever, which is the title of the book I wrote in 2017. But leadership is also a catalyst. And this sounds biased, but Mike was a great leader because he wasn't beholden to anyone, and he really said what he wanted to do, and he did it. And PlanNYC, for example, there was no call for PlanNYC. There was no call to create 165,000 units of affordable housing. He let his deputies come up with the great ideas, and he supported them.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing was we had a philosophy, and the philosophy was what I called the virtuous cycle of growth. We've got to grow, because when we grow with more residents, more jobs, more visitors, then we generate money, and we can reinvest that money back into quality of life, and the cycle just keeps perpetuating. I would say today we are in a different place because the population of New York has declined by 6% since 2020, and the budget is more constrained, and so quality of life is deteriorating in the eyes of most people. So growth is really critical. The third thing we had was a plan. And the plan we came in with, and we expanded as the city was growing. And not to say we got everything right. We should have produced a lot more housing because that's the key to growth of the city. But we did try and create a lot of housing, but we didn't do enough. We had all these plans, and if you read the Urbanist, you'll get a sense for this vast scope of those plans. And the fourth thing was, which I talked about before, was execution. We had, as I said, a great team. We worked together. We communicated effectively. And we found creative solutions to overcome the sometimes impossible obstacles. I'll give you an example. And Mark Riggs played a huge role in this. The High Line. So we had to win over every one of the 38 landowners who owned property under the High Line.
How many landowners?
38. And they were impossible. Within 2 weeks of my coming into City Hall, they were represented by the lawyer who's going to be the corporation counsel. And they pulled a wagon in, all 38 of them. And they had a big concrete block on it, claiming that it had fallen down from the High Line. We were one decision away, court decision away, from tearing the High Line down. And we had to figure out how we could buy off those 38 landowners.
They should have been saying thank you.
They didn't. And so we thought about it and thought about it. And we had no money back in 2002 and 2003. So we created a very clever scheme. We gave them air rights over their property, and they could only sell it to landowners who had property on 10th, 11th, and 12th Avenues. And they were the only ones who could sell it to. So we created air rights, then we created a market for those air rights, and it cost us nothing. And the landowners bought in. So you've got to be really creative. The same thing we did on Hudson Yards. We couldn't afford to pay for the subway, the 7 extension. Shelley Silver, who was evil and corrupt, and defeated the state.
You seem to be really patient with him during the time.
Yeah.
You didn't engage, right?
We hated each other.
Didn't he get his in the end?
He died in jail. I feel bad. So what we did was we came up with the largest tax increment financing district in the world. And we financed $3 billion and said that only the bondholders would get repaid if buildings were built. So the city wasn't on the hook. And it worked out because we were creative in trying to find a financial solution to an impossible problem.
I have one more question of my own, and then I'd like to invite questions from the audience if we can. It's not lost on me that a New Yorker whose thumbprint on our city has arguably done more than anyone in my lifetime is not from New York. And instead from Detroit. And I just want you to, how'd that happen?
So I had been to New York 3 times for 4 days before I moved here because my wife Elisa took a job here. And I hated New York. And
you did a lousy job of showing that.
Yeah, well, it took time. But my first year in New York, I went to my 3rd year at the NYU Law School. I transferred from Chicago, and it was easy. So I didn't do anything. My major activity was alternate side of the street parking. But when I didn't do that, I rode the subway to visit various neighborhoods. And gradually, I became enamored with New York.
What was that tipping point where you became enamored with New York? You stopped rooting for the Tigers and started rooting for the Yankees?
That I did. But, I was working at Lehman Brothers. I was working nights, and the Lehman Brothers was downtown, and we lived on Gramercy Park, and I rode up the FDR Drive, and I saw the Brooklyn Bridge lit up at night, and I was enchanted. But it was a series of things, and when I really crossed the Rubicon was when I went to the World Cup game in 1994, the summer final game. I didn't like soccer. I couldn't care about the 2 teams, Italy and Bulgaria. It was 100 degrees. We took the bus out there, and I was in a bad mood. And I walked into the stadium, and it was the most exciting sporting event I'd ever seen. It couldn't sit down. And I realized that in New York, for every team, you could fill the stadium with hometown fans from every country. And that's when I thought, why hasn't New York ever hosted the Olympics? And so I left the stadium that day with that notion in my head. and I studied for like 2 years everything about urban planning, the Olympics, what it would take to get the Olympics. And I developed a plan with the team. And the rest that was the tipping point, really.
Who's got a question for Dan? And we can sort of see you from here. So just raise your hand up tall. One here, and then we'll go back here.
Yeah, Ben, if you would have a suggestion for somebody that wanted to have any kind of impact like you've had, what would be a suggestion, a few suggestions, for a New Yorker that would like to see things change here? It'd be better.
Well, what I would say is you have to do your homework. You have to have an idea, and you have to do your homework. And if you do your homework, you can sell that idea. And that's the way I entered, became an influencer and an activist and a doer. But you got to have an idea, and you got to do your homework.
Just a quick second question. Do you take interns?
Not anymore.
Thank you. Right back there. Yes.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. I'm going to get into a very specific thing, and maybe you're not staying abreast of things that are happening in New York City right now. One of the big sweeping legislative changes that almost no one knows about because the press doesn't seem to cover it are these City of Yes proposals. And I'm curious of your perspective on them, whether you actually think they're going to do what Mayor Adams and his administration believe they're going to do, particularly the one now about housing, because that's addressing, like you said, one of the things that you feel PlanNYC didn't actually accomplish, which is actually getting more affordable housing in the city.
Yeah. So, City of Yes has three components. One is about business and making it easier to open up businesses, etc. The second one is about housing, and it has densifying many communities. And the third one is about the environment. Focusing on housing, I think their estimate is that 100,000 units of housing will be created in this program. And I think that is very significant. Now, the deputy mayor for workforce development, economic development, and housing is somebody who was part of our team, Maria Torres Springer. She's incredibly thoughtful, and so I'm a complete supporter of this initiative. But we do need to generate a lot more housing. I was co-chair with Richard Bury, who's from CEO of Robin Hood, and is deputy mayor under Blasio, is a great guy. And we said, as part of the growth plan for New York, we have to generate 500,000 units of housing over the next 10 years to really grow the city. And I believe Maria can be creative and pull that off.
Thank you.
So I'm supportive.
one more in the back, and then I'm going to come up here. Sorry. And then I'm going to go to this side.
Your whole career seems to have revolved around problem solving, and you just mentioned your view about the need to create more housing. What do you see, maybe aside from housing, as the central problem the city is facing today, and what creative solution would you propose to address it?
So the big problem is population loss. You know, we lost 800,000 people in the 1970s. And the city deteriorated because we didn't have enough money to provide quality of life. Crime spiked by 33% over the 70s. And so what we need to do is grow. That's the key to everything. And housing is a critical part of it. Job creation. And I will say we have more jobs in the city than before the pandemic by a little amount. But we need to figure out where can we dominate with new industries. And my view is that urban technology is a key to the growth of New York. We need to rezone big areas of the city. You know, I'm a big fan of Sunnyside Yards in Queens. We did Atlantic Yards and the Hudson Yards, which were rail yards. The rail yards in Queens, given all the development in Long Island City, offer a 7 subway lines, easy access to Manhattan. A big desire of mine is to redevelop Red Hook and build an aerial gondola. And we had a plan for this. It never got done. To go from Red Hook to Governor's Island to Lower Manhattan in like 7 minutes. So it's a lot less expensive than building a subway. And so you gotta be creative.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for everything you do for all of us. If they were to close Rikers Island, I'm not sure if you're in favor, and I do a lot of work on Rikers Island, what would your plan be for that property? What do you see happening there?
I'd probably make it mostly housing.
Housing.
Yeah,
Housing in parks, I guess.
yeah. But it could fulfill,
I mean, it's so easy to get to.
it is. And by ferries,
Yeah,
I think it'd be very easy.
right off the Grand Central Parkway.
Yeah.
You just go right over the bridge.
So I focus on housing.
I think we have time for 2 more. I saw a hand go up over here, didn't I? Yes.
I was just wondering if the asylum seekers, if you were advising Adams, what would you suggest?
Okay. I would put them to work right away and violate federal law. Because the administration has been very slow to register them. but there's a 6-month waiting time that I think is crazy. And I would just violate federal law. The second thing I would do is I would put the migrants to work for cleaning up the city. You know, the statistics say that parks are dirtier, the streets are dirtier, there's more graffiti, and they're not working. And those who can't work or don't work, I would put them to work cleaning up the city. You know, I'd probably put some limitations, which the administration has, on the length of time that they can stay in to reduce the cost, stay in shelters. But in order to do that, you have to offer them the opportunity to work. So that's what I would do.
Thank you. One last one right here. Thank you.
Hi, well, you're going to get recognized in my graduation next month for your public service to New York City. Unfortunately, you're not going to be speaking there, so I was wondering if you had any message for the 2024 NYU graduates for us.
This is fraught. You know, everybody's different, but, you know, I've always had the view that you do what you love and you work really hard at it and you develop relationships, which is why, by the way, I don't understand why young people don't want to come into work, because for your career, you can't make a leap in terms of your career without developing relationships. And you learn so much by just seeing other people and modeling other people. You know, I was so fortunate to have great mentors. You know, when I started at Lehman Brothers, I was hired by this guy, Peter Solomon. And 40 years later, he's still my mentor. And when he was the deputy mayor for economic development in the Koch administration, and when I turned down Mike Bloomberg, he wrote me an 8-page handwritten letter about why I should take the job. And having mentors and developing relationships and working hard, that's the advice I would give you.